Thank you for joining us for a bonus episode of Behind the Mic, powered by Revolt Podcast Network. I'm your host, Wise Brissett, RPN Community Manager and Podcast Enthusiast. Now, y'all already know the whole spiel I'm about to do. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok at Revolt Podcast Network, and follow us on Twitter, formerly known as X. That's my new thing. You can follow us at Revolt Podcast. Now, do me a favor. Before we even get started to this pod, subscribe to Behind the Mic, wherever you listen to your podcast. That could be YouTube, that could be Apple, that could be Spotify, wherever. Subscribe. We really appreciate it. Now, on this episode, we are joined by a man of many, many talents. Ian Vaughn, host of Can We Talk R&B podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
What's good, brother? Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Seriously. Now, today's episode is called Black Rhythm is R&B. And I thought, who better to have on the episode than Ian Vaughn? Again, like I said, a man of many contributions, not just to his talents, but to R&B sound and storytelling. So Ian, please tell me a little bit more about yourself.
What's up? So I go by the R&B Ambassador. At least that's a term that's been coined. I've been honored to wear as an ambassador for R&B music. And I mean, there's so many colorful sides of myself as relates to talents and giftings and things in terms of who I am across the board. But specifically from a music backstory, I'm just a music lover, right? So I grew up like most R&B crooners, the traditional origin story. I was a church kid, grew up learning how to sing and harmonize and perform in front of hundreds and thousands of people since I was a small kid. Fast forward to my first opportunity to perform, well, not to perform rather, but to record professionally. I was around 12 or 13 years old, and me and some other kids some of my brother and cousins or whatever, we were invited to a studio and record a Zydeco album that was on a label on Warner Brothers, the artist back when I was a kid. And we were singing background vocals for it. The project is called Choo Choo Boogaloo. So this was like, after being a church singer as a small kid, having the opportunity to go to real studios, like, man, like, hey, this is what I really want to do. You know what I'm saying? So got a chance to record a full album, and it was one of those kids albums. So it's kind of like, if you remember Barney back in the day and it had the kids singing in the background, It was kind of one of those style things, but it was for Zydeco music. And nonetheless, the experience of being able to record, hear yourself, and watching the producers and the engineers helping us put this thing together, I really just was like, oh my God. And before I wanted to be a basketball player, I want to be an artist. I want to be a musician. And so that's my first opportunity to actually get a chance to record. But obviously I was crooning, and I'm learning my gift and learning how to become an artist. So soon after, once I get to high school, I had started a group with some guys, and that's really where I really started to develop my R&B chops as an artist. So I'm doing the talents, I'm performing, I'm writing, I'm doing all those things. So ultimately, I come from the pedigree. I say that all the time. Like, I am a student of R&B music from all of our greats from the 80s, the 90s. I'm a product of the 90s into the 2000s. So I look at a lot of the guys, like some of our favorite groups, like the 112 and the Drew Hills and the Jagged Edges. I was always one of those people behind the scenes connecting with the producers, connecting with writers, and just background insider as a fan, as a talent, as an aspiring artist. And all of those things, I guess my studentship, learning, becoming more or less a steward of this thing, and my ability to become who I am. So again, I'm an artist, I'm a singer-songwriter, all those things, and I've done some cool things in that. But above all of that, I'm a fan. So as a fan, music, you know what I mean? And that's pretty much who, at least one major part of who I am. And honestly, that's the premise of why I started the Can We Talk R&B podcast, because I have a lot of knowledge of my own, and I love to bounce ideas off like-minded.
No, thank you for sharing that. And honestly, like, it is truly a treasure, because people don't necessarily realize that we are living history. Like, we are still a very young culture. When you think about cultures across the world. Like we're talking about some cultures are 2,000 years old. So we are literally building history right now. We had an opportunity to actually like sit down and talk in person around the time for Essence Fest. So last year, what was that, July? Right. And
July.
Ian is an incredible individual, like not just like focused on R&B, and we're going to get more into that as well too, but very, very smart man. Y'all going to find out today on this episode. But right now, let's start with the tunes. We have a new playlist on Spotify called B-Sides, Track of the Week, where you can find all of our guests' favorite songs anytime. Now, B-side tracks to me are songs that aren't necessarily all that popular, but are as good or better than the A-side. So, Ian, tell me, what B-side track do you want to share with us today and why?
Well, I guess I'll have to do a shameless plug. So I have a song. I dropped this song. It's called Lay You Down. It's 100% a B-side, but it's a bop. It really is. When I put that song together, shout out to my man Derek Harvin, my boy Franklin Shaw. We put this piece together. And it's just a beautiful piece. Like, it's just one of those joints that has all the vibes on it. It has live guitar. Shout out to my man Tim Marchand for lacing the guitars for me. I just really love the record. I want more people to hear it. And I think if people hear it, they'll be able to add it to their playlist and be like, okay, there's some vibe on top of it.
I love that. And it's definitely going to be on our playlist. So y'all go on Spotify. It's exclusively on Spotify. We got you. Lay You Down. Okay. All right. So Ian, thank you for sharing that. This is where we're going to dive more into Ian Vaughn, the person now, right? So you got roots in Baton Rouge. We know music obviously shaped your upbringing. So what would you say inspired you first and foremost to shift from performing to podcasting?
Is a great question. So I still perform, but I do it sparing, right? So I get a lot of people, I get requests for bookings all the time that I'm just not in the headspace to be fully in the performance mode. But when I'm in that mode, I like to perform. But, you know, the music business really broke my heart. Still passionate about creating music, still passionate about performing, but there's so many other elements that come into that, right? Yeah. So there's a difference between a recording artist and just a performing artist. I live in New Orleans. You can go on any club, any block, and there are performing artists performing every day. That's not living that I wanted to have for myself. Not saying that some of those guys don't do it really, but that's not the living I wanted to have for myself. And the business guy that I am always wanted to take things to the next level and live a different type of lifestyle, even when music wasn't specifically providing that. So ultimately, the whole time I'm still very passionate about it. And I remember I had the idea to start a podcast around 2018, 19. And I was kind of sitting on my head. And because again, I didn't know what to do. I'm an artist. I'm like, man, I don't know. I want to still put music out. I still want to do this. But ultimately, just watching the wave, I'm like, I have so many friends in the business. I have so many people that I talk to. And when I talk to these guys, they have some of the most amazing stories. I have a lot of stories. And I'm like, a lot of people, when I get to talking and saying these stories or having these conversations, a lot of people really love to hear it. They're like, man, I didn't know that that's how that song was created. Or I didn't know that happened on tour. Or I didn't know this particular artist's personality, that they were this way. And I said, man, this would be a fantastic opportunity to start a podcast talking about all of this. Fast forward, COVID happened. Again, still sitting on my hands, had the idea, but didn't know where to start. One of my good friends is Van Lathan. So I called him, and he had already had 2 successful podcasts at this point. And I asked for his advice. And he said, Ian, you need a producer. You need a producer. That's all you need. Get some equipment and go for it. Still, I had that information in my head, but I'm like, okay, now where am I going to find a podcast producer? Right.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2023. I called a friend of mine who used to be my publicist for my artistry. And I called her, hey, I got a new single I'm dropping. Help me do a press release. I need to get the noise out for this song. And she's like, I'm not really doing publicist stuff as much anymore. I've shifted to podcast producing. And I was like, no way. And I told her, I have a show. It's called Can We Talk R&B. I already had the company set. I already had all the logistics set up. I just didn't have the show laid out. Fast forward we had one conversation. I flew to New York the next week and we started shooting immediately. So
Wow.
all of that is the journey to how I got here. And honestly, it's one of the most fulfilling things that I've done. It doesn't take away my passion to perform and to record because I'm still doing that. But it definitely is a fix because I'm able to have these conversations with so many amazing songwriters, producers, artists, executives, music lovers, and we speak the same language and we're building a community that's been fantastic. So it's just a wonderful thing. And look, all things in God's timing, you know what I mean? Like all good things.
Would you say that now, having had the podcast now for 2 seasons, would you say that you now see the industry a little bit differently? Like the musicians, the individual pieces, you got your engineers, you got your producers, you got your songwriters, you got your performers. Like, do you see the industry different now that you've done the podcast? Or do you feel like you still have like the same lens that you had when you were solely like an artist?
I feel like I have learned a lot since I've had the show, but to be honest, I don't know that I see the industry through a different lens because, again, I've been in it the whole time. So a lot of people that I'm having these conversations with, I'm learning their individual stories, but a lot of their stories are very similar to mine.
Yeah.
So they may have had a top 10 hit or they may have had a number 1 hit, but in terms of how they got there, all of that is very similar to my own personal experience. So I have definitely learned a lot having all these conversations with different people. But my lens on the music business is the same. Now, the industry has evolved so much since I first started. And honestly, as I would say the last so many years, it's really ever evolving at this point because things are moving so much back with technology and AI and all of these other things. So I just find it to be an interesting landscape. The fact that anyone and everyone can decide to be an artist today, talent or no talent, that muddies the water a lot. Obviously, the cream does always rise to the top, but it doesn't make it difficult when you pour everybody in the bottom of this jar and now you have to fight your way, show how talented you are. It's an interesting thing, but I enjoy having the conversations. And honestly, this pivot, I think, has just been just the best pivot for me.
Yeah.
Because as you can see, I'm a talker as well. So like, I love to have the conversations and then, building out this landscape. I'm also able to share my opinions and hear other opinions on other artists and so forth.
Lovely. Okay. So, the theme of this episode is called Black Rhythm Is. So to you, your own interpretation, what does Black Rhythm mean to you and how does it resonate in your life and work?
I can answer the latter part of the question first. So how does Black Rhythm resonate in my life? I mean, it's just who I am, right? I don't know how not to be Black. I also don't know how to be rhythmic. It is the soundtrack. It is the tempo in which the way I speak. It's the tempo in which the way I walk and the way I view things in terms of the way I conversate or I live my life. You know what I'm saying? So like, I wouldn't want to be nothing but who I am. You know what I'm saying? I do believe God put us all on this planet, individually with our own characteristics. At the same time, I do feel there was an extra special sauce and a unique sauce, or an element, let's say gold, an element that's in our gene pool. It's in our DNA. And that aroma, right? We give off something. It's a flavor that we give off that is just unique. And I'm proud to be a part of that kill and a part of that special spice of life. And that's what Black Rhythm means to me. And we're rhythmic and we have that special sauce in so many different things. I know we get a lot of times confined to sports or entertainment, but when we think about our scholars and we think about our politicians, our doctors, our lawyers, our business professionals, our ancestors, we all have something special. And then there's room for it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's room for every individual flavor. Being from Louisiana, I can akin this to like gumbo. We put a lot of things in. We have seafood in there. We have sausage in there. We have okra in there. Some people put all type of things in there. All types of different peppers and spices and so forth, so forth. And to me, that kind of reminds me of the Black community in terms of we're not a monolith at all, but we all do have a special flavor that we have in rhythm that we have that just makes us so special.
Yeah. You said that so amazing. And even like the gumbo analogy is just like perfect. 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 All right, y'all. On the other side of this break, y'all, we're kicking it into overdrive with our rapid fire game right after this. I've always wanted to have the opportunity to talk to each of you individually. And guess what? Now I can, thanks to FanList. You can now visit fanlist.com/podcasts with an S and leave us a voicemail. Share your thoughts, your favorite moments, and even shout out a host that inspires you. Who knows? You might even hear your voice in the podcast. So visit fanlist.com/podcasts with an S to get started. I'm looking forward to hearing from y'all. And we're back, y'all. Thanks for sticking around. And we are now kicking it into overdrive with a rapid fire round of word association. Ian, are you ready?
I'm ready, brother.
All right, cool. I got my y'all know how I get. I got my stopwatch together this time, though. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Soul.
I think about my mind. I think about my being, who I am. Like, without my soul, that my body is just a shell, but my soul is my actual being, myself.
Freedom.
Freedom is, to me, one of the most important things about being alive. It's about having the freedom to be flexible, freedom to explore, freedom to be who you are and do other things.
I love doing behind the mic. I just want to keep saying that to people. Like, I love doing this podcast because I am getting, you spoke about this as well too. Like, you get an opportunity to like talk to people authentically. So yes, before we go, Ian, what's one thing that you need people to know about you leaving this podcast?
Well, one major thing, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business guy. I'm a serial entrepreneur, actually. So I own a couple of companies, a couple of them I'm very proud of here in Louisiana. I am part owner of a medical telehealth clinic called Mary Medical. We specialize in doing recommendations for medical marijuana in the state of Louisiana. I also have a marketing sales company called Industry Marketing Specialist. And what we do is I partner with different organizations or specialty pharmacies or other sales organizations for different products. And I put salespeople in place to grow their business versus them trying to hire and train people in place that can really take their business to the next level. So these are things that I'm also passionate about. And I'm also into real estate investment. I'm a partner in a company called Proof Consultants, and we do property investments. So I'm a multifaceted person with all of these things that my hands are in. And of course, above all of that, I'm a big fan of R&B music and an artist and a creative. So I don't know what someone would characterize my personality as, but I am definitely multifaceted, and I make room with my freedom to express all of these different entities that I have my hands in.
Incredible. Didn't I tell you in the beginning of this? Man of many talents. Man. All right. Ian, thank you so much for coming on this bonus episode of Behind the Mic, powered by Revolt Podcast Network. Ian, make sure that you tell the people where they can find you on socials, where they can listen to the podcast, all the jazz.
Absolutely. So please tap into Can We Talk R&B? That's everywhere. That's on YouTube. That's on Instagram. That's on Fanbase. That's on X and on TikTok. Can We Talk R&B? You can follow me directly there, or you can follow me on Ian Von Music. That's IANVON Music on all of those platforms as well. Tap in, man. We have some great episodes, great conversations with some of your favorites in R&B.
Real quick, Ian, one episode. If someone wants to start the podcast right now, where should they start?
There's so many fantastic episodes. Like, one of the ones I would think maybe, start off season 2. We started with John B. We had one last season with Maya. I've had Donnell Jones. There's so many fantastic episodes. I feel like you could just hit random, literally go on, it's random, and just tap in. Brian Alexander Morgan, he's a producer and writer for all those SWV hits. Fantastic episode. There's just so many episodes that we've had that's been so amazing. I don't know. I wouldn't know where to start.
Great answer. I knew you wasn't going to be able to choose one. All right, y'all. Thank you again for listening to Behind the Mic, powered by Revolt Podcast Network. I'm your host, Wise Grisette. You all can find me at The Real Wise, W-I-Z-E. I'm internationally known on the microphone as Wiz, Wizzy, and Wise, and I'm out. Behind the Mic, powered by Revolt Podcast Network, is hosted by me, Wise Grisette. Special thanks to the Indie Creative Network and Storytime Studios for editing and producing this podcast.